God. Because God is so good, he has to be true. In the Hebrew, the phrase "so good it must be true" literally means that something is so good until it seems exaggerated. God is so good that he seems exaggerated. What God has done in our lives, we ought to be able to tell the world, and people saying, "You exaggerating." When your testimony ought to sound like an exaggeration how much God has blessed you. The moves that God has done in your life to bring you to where you are today ought to sound like an exaggeration. Because God is so good, it ought to seem like we're exaggerating as Christians. People ought to be saying, "You lying. Ain't nobody blessed you like that." People ought to be saying, "I don't even believe that." People ought to be saying, "I can't believe that. I need to get some of that God that you got if he's done all that for you." It ought to seem like you are exaggerating. Hallelujah. That's how powerful that God is, that it makes an exaggeration out of your life. You ought to be able to say, "I done had 2 or 3 strokes, and I used to hang my shoes up in the hospital room because I couldn't even walk." They ought to be saying, "You exaggerating, Felicia." They ought to be saying, "You exaggerate." When you talk about the amounts you give, people ought to say, "You exaggerated. You can't tell me that 2 years ago you was crying in your bathroom because you couldn't roll a nickel against a dime." You exaggerating the way God is blessing you. The blessings of God ought to sound like an exaggeration. But tell somebody, it's not an exaggeration from where he brought me from. It's not an exaggeration of what he is doing in my life. It's not an exaggeration of how he has made me the head and not the tail, above only and not beneath. We didn't come from bishop fathers. We didn't come from mothers that preached the gospel around the world. We came from nothing, and now we know the word with the best of them. Tell somebody, it's not an exaggeration.